I'm walking down Draper Street in the village of La Jolla, California, and I wanted to reflect briefly on the histories of racial segregation and redlining, and also the legacies in the landscape reflected and depicted in the Homeowners Loan Corporation city surveys done in the mid-1930s. La Jolla is best known today for its inspiring topography, its sheltered beaches, its mild climate, and of course for the wealth and privilege of its residents. The census tracts covering La Jolla boast a median household income of over $100,000 a year, but more eye-popping are its home values, with a median price topping $1.7 million. And just up the road today, there's a 6,000 square foot beachfront house on the market for $27 million bucks. La Jolla is one of the most expensive and exclusive places in the United States, and it has been for over a century. At the same time, La Jolla shares a history of segregated diversity with many early exclusive communities in the U.S. where grandiose homes and manicured landscapes and luxurious lifestyles required an army of service workers to sustain. La Jolla shares a history of segregation, redlining, and displacement as well. The blocks around Draper and Pearl Streets developed in the early 20th century as a community of African American, Mexican American, and working class white families who built homes in the community and earned a living by making life more comfortable for the community's social elite, and also operating small businesses to serve one another in their community. In 1936, the appraiser for the HOLC wrote of the community, and I quote, "This area is known as the servant quarters of La Jolla." The appraiser noted that the area was within easy walking distance to downtown, and that it was, quote, set aside by common consent for the colored population. Working families occupied one-story frame cottages like the ones behind me, and the HOLC estimated that about 40% of the people who lived here owned their own homes, which was about twice as high as the proportion in African American communities around the United States. They lived on streets that were paved with sidewalks and street lights. The appraiser commented unfavorably on the upkeep of some properties, but also noted that conservative loans could still be made here, in spite of the fact that the HOLC rated this neighborhood as D, or hazardous. It's not known whether future investors and lenders took that advice, but it is clear from the landscape today that Draper Street and this neighborhood followed the pathway that many such communities followed in the middle part of the 20th century in the aftermath of the HOLC surveys. Over time, neighborhoods like Draper Street faced ongoing pressure for displacement through public projects such as road and highway building, institutional expansion, and targeted use for other public purposes. The legacies of redlining played a role too. Hamstrung in their ability to attract capital for investment and upkeep in the mid-20th century, neighborhoods such as Draper Street presented bargain opportunities for real estate investors in the late 20th and early 21st century who had gentrification and displacement in mind. These forces are evident here on Draper Street today, as just a handful of the original homes plus the sanctuary of the Prince Chapel by the Sea AME Church remain to tell the story of a community, which Prince Chapel describes in its website as a community that included the contributions of everyday people who quietly went about their daily lives, enhancing the communities where they lived. Over time, white La Jollans found space for public projects on the streets and alleys surrounding Draper Street, a parking lot and annex for the old U.S. Post Office, additions to the La Jolla Public Library, commercial replacements, and expanded buildings and playfields for the Bishop's School. More recently, townhomes and condominiums for a new generation of La Jollans have taken the place of the original cottages and backyard apartment buildings that were once the heart of Black La Jolla. Homeowners may have profited in the exchange, and one can hope that some La Jolla families earned a just reward for investments in real estate made by earlier generations. But for the most part, the community has moved on. That is except for Sunday mornings and weekday afternoons when services ring out from Prince Chapel AME just over on Cuvier Street. La Jolla, California, Draper Street, redlining, segregation in the 20th century city.